Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again to the last session on the Red Stage for today. We have talked a lot about IT solutions in the sessions that we've heard so far. We will, of course, continue to talk about healthcare IT, but we will somewhat extend the scope now and discuss not only about software anymore, but actually about real palpable products. I'm talking about 3D printing, as you can see in the program. Printing health is 3D printing ready for broad implementation. We won't have a discussion like we had in the last session, but we will have a number of short presentations that introduce some very different possibilities to use 3D printing in healthcare, and we will discuss all presentations together afterwards to not run out of time. I have 4 experts up here on the podium. I welcome Tobias Gantner. He is a medical doctor by training and today the CEO of the healthcare Futurists. Most of you will probably know him. He is somewhat famous. I welcome Tobias Grix. Tobias Grix is a researcher at Cellbricks, an innovative startup that is working on bioprinting human tissue. Welcome, Tobias. I welcome Dr. Ludger Feyen from the Helios hospital in Krefeld. He is a neuroradiologist or striving to become a neuroradiologist. Or already? Okay. He is telling us in the first presentation that we will have in a minute about 3D printing in the field of neuroradiology. And I welcome on the end of the table Professor Dr. Günter Tovar. He is the director of the Institute of Interfacial Process Engineering and Plasma Technology at the University of Stuttgart and also speaker of the Fraunhofer Nanotechnology Alliance. Is that correct? Okay, perfect. We start right away. First presentation will be given by Dr. Ludger Feyen from the Helios Hospital on 3D printing models for aneurysm surgery in neuroradiology.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a neuroradiologist and I'm going to talk about implementation of 3D technology in neuroradiology. As you might know, neuroradiology, usually there are 2 kinds of diseases like hemorrhage and ischemic stroke. And we can use 3D printing in dealing with these diseases. Especially in a vast amount of hemorrhage is caused by aneurysms. And in the planning of interventional occlusion of aneurysms, we can use 3D printed models. As you might know, there are various kinds of 3D printing. We use optical technique because of the high resolution. And this is let me outline the production of such a model. We have our 3D dataset from the angiography side. After post-processing, a model is printed, resulting in this small block. And inside of this block, you can see the cerebral vessels as well as a complex aneurysm. And we can use this model for the planning of the intervention and to choose the right device for the occlusion of the aneurysm. So peri-procedural problems will hopefully not occur. This is how it works. Usually it takes one working day to produce such a model, so we cannot use it in emergency cases. As I mentioned earlier, these models are very exact. And this is then our training setup. You can see the printed aneurysm on the left side inside this basin, and we can access the aneurysm via guide wire and catheter as exactly as we would in the patient setting. So let me show you one example. Here we have a complex aneurysm already printed, and in the lower column you can see the device, the stent inside the aneurysm. And we need this device to prevent small coils to fall back into the vessel. And usually from the data sets you cannot exactly tell the behavior of the stand in complex settings. So we need to train and to choose the right stand. Here you can see a comparison of the real patient and the model, and on top you can see the implemented stand device. As you can see, the image matches quite nicely. In this example, you can see the stand implemented in the model, and after a successful training, implemented in the real patient. So we can use this procedure to choose the right stand as well. And afterwards, we implemented the stand and used plating coils to occlude the vessel. So what can we use 3D printing for? We can use it for dealing with complex aneurysms, to prevent hemorrhage, and to lower peri-procedural complications. In short, we can use this technique also in the setting of training for ischemic stroke. As you might know, the extrusion of clots from the intracranial vasculature is a big issue in the last few years. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ludger, Feyen. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. I think, given that we have very different topics, I would allow one or two very short questions that deal specifically with the respective topic of the presentation. Any specific questions on model printing in neuroradiology? That's not the case. Fine for me. Thank you very much. I have to add that he didn't know that he had to do this presentation a couple of days ago, so he jumped in for his colleague. Thank you very much. We continue with Tobias Grix from Cellbricks. We will switch the topic, move from 3D model printing to 3D printing of human tissue, and we are very excited to hear what you're actually doing.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. So Cellbricks is a young startup founded from the Technical University Berlin just last year, and we are not printing just models, but we print real organs with living cells that maybe later can be transplanted in human beings. So let's see. So just very short, printing human organs is not that easy. So you cannot just push a button and then some machine does some noise and in the end there comes out a pumping heart. That is something we dream about, but it's not reality yet. So far we are creating human organ models with living tissue that you can use in your laboratory for research and scientific research, and basically for tissue engineering applications. So if you do research, if you want to develop some pharmaceutical substances, for example, you need to do tests and you need to know if the substance is working in a human being or not. Of course, you can do animal testing at one point, but our goal is to actually not be so that you don't have to do animal testing, because you can use human cells and don't have to use animal cells. So right now we have some organ models that are already working, and we are working to continuously enlarge our pipeline. And we also have some 3D cell culture disposables that you can use then actually to cultivate your printed organ models and to do your research. And of course, our long-term goal is to print a transplantable organ. So we are talking about like a pipeline of 20 to 30 years here, I'm sure. But within this time, I'm confident that at some point we will be able to print, for example, a liver or even a heart that can be transplanted into a human being, so that you don't need a donor organ. Just shortly, an example for the bioprinted liver. So the liver itself is built up by the smallest functional unit, the so-called liver lobulus. And just one of these lobuli can already perform like the whole liver. So just one lobuli is enough to do some basic research and to basically get all the functions the whole liver has. So what we do here is we take a sample, or we just take the scheme of the liver lobulus, and we create a computer model out of it. And then we print this model with living cells. So we combine different cell types, which are also in the human body. And after that, this model can be cultivated and basically functions like the liver. So we can perform tests on it, you can apply substances, and you get readouts like your normal cell culture. Maybe to Cellbricks itself, so we are a small team yet, but continuously expanding. And so far, these are the main researchers so far. On the left side, you can see Dr. Ludger. He's the guy who invented the whole thing and who's the founder of the company. And then, including me, there are some researchers in the core team that are developing different organ models and cooperate with clinics and doctors and researchers. So we have a great advisory board, and yeah, we are looking to a bright future, I hope, and to see that printing human organs will be at some day possible for transplanted organs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tobias Grix. I have one question myself. You mentioned your colleague Lutz Glocke. He said in an interview with the Tageszeitung, a German daily newspaper, asked when it will be possible to print actual human organs for transplantation, that you cannot overtake millions of years of evolution just because you own a printer now, which I found a very nice quotation. What do you think? Which kinds of organs will be printed first? What is easy and what is not so easy? Good, it should work. It should work.
Should work?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So of course you cannot just print any organ. So if you take the heart, for example, it's quite complex and not that easy. But what you can do already is printing the skin, for example. So the skin is an organ which can be quite complex. But the basic form of the skin is actually really simple. So you have different layers of cells which basically protect you and have a barrier function. And you can already print this. The challenge is to do this in a large scale. So I mean, the human body has skin of I don't know how many square meters, like 2, 3, 4. So that's the main challenge here.
Is this kind of research in animal trials already, or are we talking about laboratory research at the moment?
Yeah, so we use it in the laboratory, but as I speak, there are already some animal testings running.
Any short questions from the audience? You have the possibility to ask later on all our experts. I don't see any questions at the moment. Then I welcome once again Professor Dr. Günter Tovar. He is the scientist on our podium, in a way, and we are curious to hear how you, what is your opinion on the kind of practical solutions that are presented here now?
It's merging anyway, I think. So my kind of statement is that medically irrelevant 3D printing today really depends on functional bioinks, even more than on the technology of the printer machines and so on. But you'll see what I address with that. So today we have metal-based 3D printed constructs, or 3D printing. By the way, anyway, mostly it should be referred to as additive manufacturing or some other sort of fabrication. But however, 3D printing is a great term. Let's stay with it. So 3D printing of metals, we all know, or you may know, that already there are personalized implants. Like, for example, a hip, part of the hip, artificial hip, if there is too much of the tissue destroyed, then you need a special form, a special shape. And that is by selective laser sintering that is done and being used in today's medical technology. And also, of course, in the teeth reconstruction and so on. So that's the state of the art there. If you go for, and ceramics is about the same anyway, a little less. If you go for plastics, we've seen already the example by our colleague, and that is exactly one field of application, tools for surgery. Very important. I think I don't have to mention any more about that. Also, you have some tools really used in the operation. One is for training, as we have seen here. Other is there. Or also orthesis can be printed, personalized. However, that's always then kind of easy material. It's plastic, but nothing really to be implanted. However, if you look at our body, most of it is soft tissue. And therefore, we are really in deep need of complex shaped 3D soft tissues. And there actually one way to tackle this problem is go via hydrogels, because hydrogel is kind of the soft tissue main construct. And chemically, actually, it's a macromolecular network with high binding capacity for water, but can be natural or synthetic, can be cross-linked chemically or physically. However, important is you can achieve via hydrogels full biocompatibility and also full biodegradability. And once you're able really to, and I can't go in detail there, but there are many approaches to use these functional hydrogels also in 3D printing. And we've already heard the idea that skin will be printed easily. It's, after all, it's never as simple as you think. And basically, once you address the blood vessels, which are part of the full skin, then there's no solution ready yet, but we are on a good way. Also with a layer of, even easier probably, but even highly difficult as well, is cartilage reconstruction. It's sort of a layer by layer approach and so on. However, last slide, I'm afraid we are highly overregulated in this area in the European environment, and that hinders the progress very, very, very much. And that is kind of my statement. I want to thank my co-workers, and of course it's plenty of those, and I want to mention Kirsten Borchers, but let's go back to the last statement. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Günter, Tovar. We will talk about the regulatory issues later in the discussion, so I would bracket that out for the moment. Are there any questions in the audience relating the science behind what Günter just said? No questions at the moment. Are you working on tissue printing yourself?
Of course, yeah. The cartilage, for example, and also the skin with the blood vessels and so on. That's example from our own lab, or I should say with our partners. And we are, and that's the point. We are really in need of new material, and of course, this is kind of applied research, and we need industrial partners and so on. But they of course look for a return on invest, and they ask for how will we ever get this through the regulation, and that's a hard tackle actually.
There was a recent survey of Bitkom together with Hartmann Bund, which is a German medical doctors association. They have asked a lot of questions, but they also asked about 3D printing organs. Maybe a question to you and also to Tobias. 47% of the medical doctors in this survey said they believe that by 2030 it will be everyday reality to print implants, and another 28% said they believe it will be everyday reality to print individualized organs by 2030. Is that realistic, or are our doctors too optimistic?
Organs is a big term. So you have organs which seem simple in one hand, like skin is an organ, and if you just talk about the outer layers of the skin, then probably that might be realistic. And if you go to something more complicated than that, including blood vessels, I doubt it. It will be a little longer, I guess.
Yeah, I would fully agree. So I think like implants, like for maybe bone replacement or something, which has just some structural integrity, might be realistic by 2030, but everything that has blood vessels and therefore is very complex will take longer.
Okay, thank you. Short questions to Günter, Tovar? Not the case, so we change topic once again. Welcome again, Tobias Gantner. He's talking about a totally different field of 3D printing. We are switching to pharmacology now, or to pharmaceutical production. Tobias.
Thank you. Yeah, that's right. I brought the future with me. So we're not talking about whether this is possible or not. It is, and I'll be talking a little bit about the issues that we see and the risks and challenges, but also the upsides. So you can look at that afterwards, and I'm going to get right into the presentation. So yeah, printing health. Is 3D printing ready for broad implementation? The question is, how do we go from lab to life? We have the possibility to do 2D printing, which is happening with a inkjet. You can do this. We're doing this for a couple of medications with a very broad therapeutic range. And are we able to do 3D printing? Yes, we are, and we're doing this with an extrusion of filaments under GMP conditions. Point is, there's a lot of regulatory hurdles here, and the question is this actually compounding what we're doing, or are these new products? So if you print a poly pill with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different compounds, is this compounding? If it is compounding, it can be done at the pharmacy level. If this is not compounding, we're probably looking at a completely different game, which means we have to do much more tests, not just pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, but go back to the drawing board again. So this will be a political decision, which will also have a lot of economic impacts here. We're also looking at a change of the wholesalers and manufacturers' value chain. So the question is, who is the manufacturer? What's the manufacturer going to do? Is the pharmaceutical company producing a 3D printer in the future? Are they selling 3D printing heads or 3D printing technologies? Are they selling their compounds? Who is actually producing the drug on a legal basis? Is this a pharmacist? Is this a doctor? Is this possible the doctor-physician? And how do we tie in all these kinds of diagnostic tools that we are looking at right now, if you look around yourself? How do we tie in all the IT issues that we have? And what are we going to do at the level of the patient? So there will be a change of business model is what we see, because we are looking in 3D printing of medication primarily at generic medication that we do 3D print. Now the point is, if you argue with an insurance company, they'd always say, look, pressed paracetamol is dirt cheap, so we don't need to pay pretty much anything for that. Whereas if you go into your poly pill and you do compounding, this will exceed the price that we already have for a generic drug. So we think this will be an increase in terms of value-based healthcare. So we provide medication to the patients as they need it, according to their biome, according to their genome, according to their metabolism, according to their cytochrome P450. So in the old days, we used 20 milligram metformin for everybody, one socks fit all. Well, the question is, what if you just need 17.4 milligram or 16.8 or 22.9? This is what we'll be able to do, and this is where we think side effects will go down, and this is where we think this needs to be exploited in terms of value-based healthcare. So this is another artifact of the future. This is the iPhone 13, which you see is transparent. And so you get the patient in the middle, John Doe, born in 1969, so some time to go until those guys who were born in 1969 look like that. But the question is, you might be able to choose who's going to print the medication for you. Is this Epson or HP or Kyocera or any other printing company? And there's no science fiction. Those guys want to engage in this technology. Are you going to have compounds run by Bayer or Novartis or any other pharmaceutical company? Who brings the data about your biome? Is this Apple? Who transports it to your doorstep? Is this going to be Amazon? Where are you going to pick it up? At which pharmacy? All these kinds are here. And underneath, you see the doctor will be able to change the therapeutic regimen. So you got furosemide, candesartan, metformin, all these kind of things. So this is the possibility that we already do have right now in terms of 3D printing. We have just a lot of hurdles. If you want to get more information on that, please be sure to pick one of those leaflets. They contain pretty much what I've said and talked about. So we're also looking into new things, like a pill doesn't need to look like a pill just because it has looked like that for the last 150 years. We can pretty much change form, size, color, taste, you name it. So those are the possibilities we look at. And if you're interested in that, and this is the advertisement block here, we have a Healthcare Innovation Week coming up. It's in Cologne and Düsseldorf, containing a hackathon and a very prestigious convention. And that's it for me. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Tobias. Maybe you can give the pills to the people. You don't want to? Okay. You have to look afterwards.
Those are actual original pills. So
Okay.
as a doctor, I'm not allowed to dispense medication to somebody who have never checked before. So
Very good. Okay.
another regulation here.
We have heard 3 different examples for 3D printing in healthcare, model building, tissue printing, and printing pharmaceutical compounds, printing tablets, printing whatever you call it in this age. We can discuss about each of them for an hour. I think I would like to focus a little bit on the overarching issues to tie our discussion a bit together. I think implementation is a topic that is relevant for both pharmaceutical printing and model printing and tissue printing, and so is regulation, which Günter already mentioned. I would start with the implementation issue and actually ask you right away, Tobias, what about a future in which 22,000 pharmacies in Germany own their 3D printer and print customized pills? Is that realistic, or are we talking about totally different distribution ways?
Well, we've conducted a global survey with pharmacists, and there are some pharmacists who don't get it and say, no, this is hell, we don't want to go there. And there are other pharmacists who said, look, where do I need to sign? I want 2 or 3. So you will probably see printing centers or printing hubs if this technology really makes it to the market, given the regulation issues. So you probably see printing hubs like online pharmacies. They're really interested in that. So if you are Doc Morris, for instance, you probably want to have your printer farm and mass customize the medication and send it out there, which is also a great customer retention kind of thing, because if your pharmacist knows what you need, then you'll stay with this pharmacist. And it still is very much in tune with, we need to look at the regulation part. If this is not compounding, if the BfArM does not consider this compounding, this is not happening in Germany. If the NICE would consider it compounding, this will happen in the UK, but not in Germany. So a lot of interesting questions that we look at. And we see printing happening at the level of the pharmacies, but it's probably not every pharmacy.
Yeah. Somewhat related question to you when it comes to model building. Could you imagine a future in which every hospital owns its own 3D printing unit to produce models for surgery in which the patient might benefit from these models?
I think yes, because it's cheap. We are talking about plastic here and no expensive issue. And it really works to train inexperienced doctors. For example, you have a lower rate of complications already. So you could use it on a big scale. Why not?
Okay. You said it takes 1 day at the moment to produce such a model. Is there any chance to speed that up? Or isn't it necessary in the routine to be quicker?
Right now, it's not probable. Because the post-procession procedure takes about 3 hours, and we cannot speed up this. But in the emergency setting, we do not need this, because in the emergency setting, we just want to achieve a satisfactory goal and not the perfect goal. So we do not need it in the setting of aneurysms.
Günter, do you see a future in which there's no post-processing necessary anymore for the 3D printed models? I think it's the post-processing issue that is actually costing time at the moment, not the printing itself.
No is a lot to be said, but definitely I'm sure that can be accelerated still and will be. That's the engineers are very good in doing that and doing it faster and faster. However, you usually need different materials. One's which will stay where it is printed, and the others which kind of fill the gap really in between, and has to be washed out today, and that probably needs some kind of post-production, but that could be very easy flushing and so on. I'm sure it's going to be a couple of hours in quite soon, actually, maybe in 5-10 years, I guess, in that field.
I learned a couple of days ago that there are different 3D printing technologies available so that you can choose between different platforms. Could one of you, whoever has something to say about it, comment on this one? Is there a specific platform that is particularly suitable for models, another one that is particularly suitable for tissues or for pharmaceuticals, or how is this technological side?
Well, for pharmaceuticals, obviously there's a lot of things. I'd like to chime in here. We had this challenge to come up with biodegradable polymers, because if you have a normal quote unquote 3D printer, you have a polymer and you color the polymer and then you do your stuff. Whereas under GMP condition, it has to be biodegradable. You have to put the active pharmaceutical ingredient in that, so you kind of know, okay, 10 centimeter correlate with 100 milligrams, something like that. So what we did is extruding and then using modified printing heads to basically 3D print the medication. There are other forms which are very experimental. These things can go to the market.
Yeah, so maybe for organ printing or something, it's quite nice to have high resolution, and so the technology is getting better and better, and basically all the different types of 3D printers are getting better and have higher resolution. But in terms of what's available right now, there's like these stereolithographic printing has already very high resolution. And despite high resolution, also the possibility to print quite large areas at once. So they already combine two advantages right now.
Thank you very much. Okay.
That would be, so if you go for resolution, you have a whole, and you look at the different technologies, then you have higher resolution, very high resolution, or rather low resolution, like what most people address when they talk about 3D printing. It's fused deposition modeling, what these drugs are printed with. And that's kind of what the, you kind of pull out or push out a molten plastic, which then is laid down. But then there are these higher resolution stereolithography or even more multi-photon polymerization technologies and so on. And so with Fraunhofer, we addressed it in combining these different technologies. Go for parts of the blood vessel system, for example, with very high resolution. Like all in the body, we have about 200 micrometers only in between different blood vessels. 200 micron, 0.2 millimeter. It's really, it's incredible. And you don't have to print those very fine structures probably, but when you look at what is there at the market, that there's only a single branch, so to two vessels, which can be used near to the heart, and that's the only thing which is on the market, and so there's a huge gap. So I guess you definitely need all these different, or not all, but many different technologies, and you need to have combinations of those and so on. So that is of course also a data thing and so kind of fabrication 4.0 definitely.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, just in Stuttgart, for example, we just recently, this last month, we started a center on mass personalization. Okay. And that is kind of trying to figure out you want to go for mass production speed and so on and price best of it, but we have the chance to go for personalized products, and that's a huge gap in between those, and we try to find ways in the academic surrounding actually together with partners from industry for accelerating that.
Yeah, thank you. We have two questions in the audience. Question number 1, question number 2, and question number 3. I take this microphone. Please use it, whoever wants to use it first. And introduce yourself if possible.
Okay, my name is Felix. I'm a BME, biomedical engineering student. And question is for me, talking about 3D printing. Do you think it will be possible in near or far future to just print or combine atoms in order to reach like everything we want to? So just combine the C and the H and the, I don't know, Mg atoms in order to build our own medicaments or what we want to?
Who wants to answer?
As a chemist, I'm sure that no one of us will live through those times. And let me make my point here, and that is like we have I learned that people working in this area usually come from two sides of approaching the theme. Either they are coming from the engineering part, and then mostly people live in their perception of matter like in continuum mechanics, which is great for mechanical engineering and for all sort of engineering. And also here, actually, on the Medica, the highest, or you have these tools based on metals and so on, and which you have very high precision and all that. However, with all, you can achieve what is there and which is really high tech with perception of continuum mechanics. So kind of, it's all the same. So, and coming from the other side, like as a chemist, or also biologists, medical doctors should know about it, but definitely a chemist really knows about it. It's a complete, we have these, even talking about organic matter, we have sort of a couple of elements which are combined to be functional elements then as molecules and macromolecules and networks and so on, and it's so complicated. So but it's not, you can combine you don't have to be really down when you look at nature and see how fascinating it works. Coming from the technical world, we have our own advantages, and so kind of we have to make a combination. But we're far from atom printing, so, but it's a good question anyway.
Clear answer in any case. Second question, please.
Thanks for this discussion. This is Ahmed Zahrani from National Guard Hospital, Saudi Arabia, Director of Healthcare Technology Development. Regarding the first presenter, when they are utilizing some of these objects, let's say, as for their clinical practice at these days, how they will check the accuracy of the printed vessels or whatever? How they gonna check the accuracy and make sure that the decision the physician gonna make, it's really gonna help them instead to harm the patient? Because there is no regulation, there is nothing, to reference to. So how they will proceed bravely like this?
We have the 3D data set from the angiography side, which is like the gold standard, and our model. And we want to compare our model to the 3D data set. So we can just take the model, go into the angiography side, and use the same contrast agent with the same catheter tip. And then you can measure if the aneurysm is printed exactly or not.
And this is done for each printed, or there is like already a range of the accuracy, like 97%, between 97 to something like that? Because I'm sure it's not 100%, but...
It's a good question, but we are not a big scale company. It's like... these are like a few prototypes, and we check them, and then we felt confident. So we do not check like each model if it's exact.
But I could in fact imagine if you base a therapeutic decision on this model, and if the decision is wrong because the model was wrong, you're running into a problem, aren't you?
Yes, we have a problem. We do not base our decision to deploy this stand or that stand on the model, but it helps. Okay. So the decision still is based on the case, the data set.
We come back to regulation in a minute. I want to let the third question, to hear the third question. Again, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm a dental surgeon and a medical writer. While we may be a long way away from being able to print organs, in dentistry it's quite usual to have chairside procedures. Mostly they are subtractive, but there are also additive things already being implemented. So we may not be that far away from being able to chairside produce something we might need in surgery. With all the imaging things that are available, we might be able to have the data for producing something chairside, and during a longer operation maybe implant something or apply it somewhere. But then, well, last year I was here and there was a lawyer here giving a lecture, and he was of the opinion that already chairside things are being done in surgery, which they aren't, obviously. But then he ended up in that wrong assumption, telling everybody that all of a sudden you become a manufacturer, a medical products manufacturer, with all the regulatory things applying to whatever you're doing chairside. It applies to the doctor, it applies to the hospital, and whoever I'm not aware of. So that was the regulatory thing I think you wanted to touch upon again.
Thank you for the comment. We will discuss regulation now. I would actually like to start with you because you mentioned the issue. Could you give a brief summary about how which regulations apply to these technologies at the moment, and why you said that there's a risk to over-regulate this area?
I think what I'm referring to is just the fact that once you're doing anything which might be biologically active, then you have to go for about the same regulation as for a new drug, and that is just so far from of a realistic scale, and that is it's always difficult to talk about that because we are all possible patients, and of course as a patient we want to have a secure treatment, but we want to have a treatment, and that is the point. So if we'll stay in Europe with that regulation, that once you do something a little more intelligent than just using what is mostly by coincidence being allowed today, then you run danger to go for a drug regulation or drug regulation systematic. Not exactly that, but nearly there, and that we don't want as possible patients already, I think. And I can only assume that there are really deep misunderstandings in the legislation procedure that we came up with so high or so demanding regulation affairs a couple of years ago.
But this is not related specifically to bioprinting, but it's related to tissue products.
Yeah, to tissue products, but it's really so it goes for this ATMP, these advanced medical therapeutic products, I think, which was meant to regulate tissue engineering, but it came out in a way that so for once, if you want to employ cells within the printing, then you're definitely in the ATMP, and then this direction for straightforward development is dead at the moment. So, but even if you do something where the cells are going to be introduced later, and you come up with a little more sophisticated concept, where you may make really take advantage from drug or ligand receptor interactions or so on, then you're already in danger of being treated as this drug administration thing, and it's really, I don't know, it can't be the will of the legislation. It's just it ran out.
To get a bit closer to his question, this is the tissue engineering part, but what about implants that are just like in dentistry material, that material?
Same.
Is there a regulation problem at the moment, or is that
absolutely just the same? So we have titanium and so on, and that's great. But if you want to have something which goes for most straightforward interaction with the surrounding tissue, you're running into the same problem.
Yes, please.
It's even the technology I presented. We just printed a piece of plastic. So with the piece of plastic, you are in danger to get problems with the Medizinproduktegesetz as well, because So even to print a piece of plastic, it's not so easy on a legacy electronic.
Even if you don't want to implant it?
I certainly do not want to implant it, but it's like a gray zone, and I think the technology developed so fast, and so the lawyers just lag behind.
Tobias Gantner, are you aware of?
Yeah, my concern behind this is I understand where the lawmakers come from, given, for instance, in drugs, the Contragan scandal. So I understand that they really watch out that nothing like that happens again. The healthcare system has a tendency to be very secluded, which means you get the pharmacists, you get the doctors, you get the pharmaceutical companies, who are all well established, and then they share the revenue amongst each other. I mean, they get in fights once in a while, but they're okay with each other. Now, a new technology comes up, which has the potential to steer up the market for the better or the worse, and then lobby forces come into the field. We say, look, this is devil's stuff. Yeah, we should never go there. Which then renders the discussion not to be a scientific discussion, a scientifically driven discussion, but also a politically driven discussion. And this is what we see here, because if you look into production of medicines, you see it's all under GMP, good manufacturing process. So that's tick the box. The point is, we take the compounds that we've been taking in years, aspirin, paracetamol, metformin, you name it, and we put them together in one pill. And the question here is this a new medication? Would we have to go through phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 study trials again for this one medication? Or could we say, look, this is compounding, this is what pharmacists used to do. For instance, if you go to the dermatologist and you get a prescription for an ointment which consists of this and this and this and that, then they put this together and off you go. And this is more, I guess, a political question than it is a scientific question that we look at. Because if politics say, look, this is compounding, then you have turmoil in the market.
But is that really that new? I mean, we have the discussions about the polypill for a couple of years now, but we had before the polypill already combined medications that did not run through phase 3, 4, but that were only run through pharmacokinetic studies. So is that really new now?
It might be new because you're combining 2 or 3 medication in one therapeutic area for antihypertension, for instance. And now we could produce a metabolic pill where we have antihypertensive medication and diabetes medication and things like that. And of course, there are things we don't know. How do these things actually interact once they have been printed into a pill and they sit in the blister box? So of course, we need to do studies about that.
You could make a sugar layer between each compound or whatever?
Could, but then we need to see, well, how does it interact with the sugar layer? How thick does the sugar layer have to be? Things like that. We have compounded pills where we actually know, okay, this compound is opening when the environment is acidic or basic. Sure, there are still open questions. The point is, do we actually want these kind of things to be in the market? Do we want to look into mass customization? Because this is ultimately what's happening. So Adidas is doing mass customization for their sneakers. So you can design your sneakers on the web. And you think they're your personal sneakers, but they're only just 80% your personal sneakers. 20% is you can't choose. And this is what we look at here too.
Are you aware of any differences in these regulatory issues between Europe and the US? Is it easier in the US to 3D print implants and get them into the patient, to 3D print tissues and get them into the patient?
Yeah, definitely, and that is. However, it's. I talk to people and they say like, oh, it's always like that. It goes to one end or the other. And we had in Europe and Germany, we had the situation that it was quite little or low regulation in medical technology, and however now in Europe and in America they had harder or more difficult regulation in medical technology. However, by now Europe really made a big jump towards really very high regulation, and so and that is probably, I think that was a nice description. It's kind of it was not in full understanding of the technological and scientific background of it. It's just probably playing in the old fields of different lobbyism and so on, and so but by now it's definitely easier in the US, and again also it's a different market. It plays by different rules. People don't talk like us about, oh, it's going to be complicated. They look for the opportunities and so on. And of course we need to do that so also. So you have companies which really kind of sell already organ printing, although they have the same trouble in really realizing it. However, you can, if someone's willing to pay for it before it gets it, it's possible. But that's again a different thing. So you ask about regulation. Definitely, it's easier there. And the point is, this is a field which is important for Europe, I believe personally, and we may agree on that. And we should really go to ease it up in one way or another.
Yes, Gantner?
I'd like to add one thing. We've been talking about government big time now in politics. We see patient groups approaching us and say, well, look, this is great. We want this. So, for instance, the people who are on antidepressants, they want mass customized medication. They don't want to go for 100 milligrams or 150 milligrams. They want 89.1 because they know if they exceed 89.1, they're probably going to have some side effects. So this is where things already get flowing. And for instance, in countries like the Netherlands, obviously the regulations are not that big. And for certain patients, there is already 3D printing and mass customization in order to get them on the level of medication or get them from the level of medication, like we do with corticosteroids, for instance, in an everyday practice.
Any more questions in the audience? To either pharmaceutical 3D printing, model printing, or tissue printing? We switch to Tobias Grix once again, and to the field of tissue printing. We haven't talked about implementing tissue printing. We have talked about how to possibly implement pharmaceutical printing. We have talked about how to implement model printing. How would you imagine that a tissue printing landscape in a healthcare system could look like?
So there already is like tissue engineering, which exists for years now, and you can take human cells and combine them in the laboratory and use them for your research. So you can apply substances, you can do pharmaceutical research, but at some point you cannot go further because your model is just not that physiologic, and you have maybe some cells in your dish and you can apply some substance and you see the cells die or the cells don't die. But our organs do so much more. So we as a human don't just die or not die. We have some different things going on in our bodies. So this is where our bioprinting process comes in. So we take the physiological part of the organ and bring the cells in this physiological environment so that the cells don't just not our cells, but they have function. They have an environment that they can cope with, and they can talk to each other and basically function like an organ, but not in a living thing, but in just a petri dish for your research. And this is already happening in laboratories because, of course, there are also regulations. Now I'm talking again about regulations. But it's far easier there as long as the models stay in the lab and in vitro, as we say. So as long as the model is not implanted in an organism, it is quite easy. So we can take cells that are already accepted, we can take materials that are already accepted, and then you can just do your research. But if we want to further develop this and have an organ that can be transplanted in an animal or even in a human being, then again, there is, as of today, no way to do this right now because it's just regulated too much.
And I fully agree with that, and that opens an important market actually. So to use tissue constructs kind of as an organ on a chip or so. So there are, of course, a regulation is not the real problem. It can be part of the regulation process, like for a real drug administration. We need to have the regulation, and we want to have better test systems really. Like animal testing is really bad for ethical reasons, and it's expensive also, but also it gives a lot of wrong answers. Like I'm told, I can't judge myself, but I'm told aspirin wouldn't be allowed today because there is in the regulatory on drug today. You have a certain rat assay, and aspirin wouldn't pass it anymore. But luckily, that is, for example, probably, especially in this area, actually a quite important drug, and obviously not having the worst problems we've had examples in the past. But so it shows really how far off we can be in some areas.
Yep. Any last questions in the audience? We're approaching the end. No. Tobias Gantner. Yep.
Just one more impulse here. We are all taken aback by the possibilities of this great technology, which is what I like to call the shiny object syndrome. So we all are in love with technology. We think this is great stuff. We print all these kind of things. There's one thing behind that, though, that I guess hasn't yet been satisfactorily mentioned, which is we need a digital infrastructure for that. For instance, for a 3D printed medication, somebody needs to send data from a doctor's office to a printer, which is wherever. And we need to come up with devices that help people take their medication, because all pills potentially look alike. So if you throw them on the floor, you're lost, right? So you need some kind of a pill dispensing device, which is of course hooked to some kind of internet, web-based service, blockchain, you name it. So this is just part of the whole infrastructure that this whole venue is about. And I thought this is also a point worth mentioning and worth pointing out, because obviously there are a lot of places we do, as of today, lack this infrastructure to transport this huge amount of data, to provide the security that we have to have in terms of taking medication. Okay. And, well, just the thing that I guess we need to look at that too.
Thank you. It doesn't get easier, I feel. One last question from the audience before we close the panel.
Yeah, Mr. Grix, you mentioned that you are able to print skin actually. So from now, leaving out regulations, how long do you think will it take to to have the possibility that surgeons will replace human skin, like if someone just had a motorcycle crash or something?
So yeah, I talked about printing skin, and as was already mentioned here, printing the whole skin is yet a challenge. But if you take like just the upper part of the skin, so the epidermal layer, and you print this, for example, I don't know how far we are away from like daily usage in a clinic, but from the technological point of view, you can already do this today. So you can take a sample from the patient, you can regrow the cells, and then you can basically repair the outer layer of the skin. But you don't really need to do this by bioprinting, for example, because it's just very simple, so you can basically use patches to do this so far.
I can imagine that it's quicker with bioprinting, isn't it?
It could be quicker, and there's already some company, I forgot the name, but they developed a spray where you can spray skin on the skin to repair it. And this is very fast because, yeah, with spraying you can basically spray the whole body in no time.
Personalized spray based on individual cells, on my own cells?
Again, sorry?
Personal spray based on my own cells?
Yeah, I think they do that. So wow. they take a sample and regrow them in the lab, and then they have lots of your cells, and then they can spray them.
Okay, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We are approaching the end. We have to end the session in time, so I would allow no more questions. Quick summary, 3D printing or additive manufacturing, as we heard, to better correlate, has the potential to change clinical routines in the future in various parts of the healthcare system. Among its potential benefits are the possibility to manufacture on site directly at the patient bed, directly in the pharmacy, directly in the hospital, wherever. Another benefit that Tobias especially elaborated on is personalization of therapy in a far bigger extent than possible today. We also learned that there are issues both technically, medically, biologically, and regulatory that have to be solved before we can talk about bringing this into daily routine, except for some special scenarios like 3D printing in dentistry, which is available for years already. Thank you very much to our experts on the podium. Thank you for your interest. Have a nice evening in Düsseldorf. See you tomorrow.